Hello, my name is Tim Kyle, and I'm a wedding and portrait photographer in the Central Texas area. And I want to share why I've moved towards shooting in aperture priority mode, primarily at weddings and for outdoor portraits. So the main argument that you get from most people of shooting in manual mode is, you want to have complete control. You want to be able to control your aperture, you want to control your ISO, and you want to know and control what your shutter speed is at any given time. And any adjustment you're making, you want to have a good understanding of that exposure triangle, so that you're exposing your subject well, the background's not too bright or dark, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, the reason I've moved towards aperture priority mode is because it is just simply faster. A computer can switch and adjust an exposure infinitely quicker than a human can. And it'll be more accurate. So, the reason people will say don't trust the camera, it'll make mistakes and et cetera, et cetera. This is true, except for when you're using the camera's light meter. So if you're shooting in manual mode and you're, shooting in spot metering or evaluative metering where you're seeing in the whole scene or center weighted, whatever metering mode you're in, if you are letting the camera's light meter tell you how to expose the photo. So you're doing spot meter on the face and you're using the manual mode and you're changing the shutter speed manual, you're just slowing yourself down. If you go over to aperture priority mode and you set your aperture manually, you set your ISO to 100 because you're outside, and you let your camera make that adjustment for you, it'll do it much faster. And so I don't see the benefit of sitting there and every shot, you turn this way, you got to change it. Turn this way, you got to change it. This is just like every wedding, right? Every single shot, you have to stop and change your exposure. That is a huge waste of time. It slows you down. It'll probably create more inconsistencies than if you just let your camera do it. Now, if you actually do have a light meter and you're bringing it over to your subject, which you can't do at a wedding, which you're not going to do at a portrait setting, an engagement session. You're not going to take a light reading, every 2 minutes, and it's just going to slow you down. So I'm not saying don't use your light meter in your camera, but if you are, I don't see the reason to shoot in manual mode. I think aperture priority is that sweet spot where you have control over all of your, creative ability. So you're manually setting your aperture and your ISO. And basically what you have to do is you have to be responsible when you're in aperture priority mode. You have to watch that shutter speed every time the light changes. You have to make sure that shutter speed is fast enough so that you're not getting motion blur. And you also want to keep checking the ISO. But overall, it's just a much more sensible way of taking shots when the environment is changing constantly. Now, when I'm indoors at a wedding, I will go to manual mode because I'm going to manually set my shutter speed regardless of what the light meter is telling me. And I'm going to set my ISO to get me, somewhat in a sensible range. But there's no reason to be in aperture priority mode then. Sometimes I will be in aperture priority mode when the light in a given situation is really good, and if I'm within a stop or two, then I will use aperture priority mode to keep the exposure about a stop under, and then I fill in with the rest of the light. But that's pretty rare. The other tip that I've kind of picked up and I've started using more is I'm using spot metering more. So one of the things that I'll do with my DSLR is I will actually meter for the face with the center point. All of the exterior focus points on Canons, unless you have a 1DX, do not spot meter, only the center point. And whether you have the focus point there or not doesn't matter. So there's a little circle in the middle on most Canon cameras, and you can kind of use that as a guideline. It's kind of hard to see at night or in bright sun. And I will actually use the asterisk to exposure lock. So let's say I'm doing a portrait session or a wedding and the bride's coming down the aisle. I will meter for her face. I will put the center weight on there and lock the exposure. And as long as I don't set my camera down or make any changes to the settings, it'll lock in. And then I will set my focus point and I will shoot away. And it doesn't matter if there's the sun behind her or if there's something really dark around her or a dark suit or whatever, her face will be exposed correctly. Now, you will run into issues with black suits, white dresses, and then you may at that point decide to boost your exposure compensation up or down a stop from there, and you probably have figured that out long before that. But these are things you have to look out for. If you're a newer photographer or you're someone trying to up their game, you might have been kind of bullied into this idea that you should shoot in nothing but manual mode, but it's just simply not the case. I had a real eye-opener when I was watching a video with Joe Busink, a wedding photographer, and he shoots celebrities and he's been doing this forever. And he shoots primarily in aperture priority mode, and I just was like, whoa, because when you watch a lot of videos and you see people, there is this mantra that if you're not shooting in manual mode, you don't know how to use your camera. So there is a caveat to all this. If you're going to shoot in aperture priority mode, you need to understand your exposure triangle. You need to know why you're doing things, and you need to know that you're letting your camera take control over just that shutter speed, really, essentially. And you need to look at that shutter speed as if you were in manual mode, checking that exposure, and making sure that you have full control over what's going on. And again, if you're in manual mode and you're using your built-in light meter to make adjustments, you're wasting time doing physical things on your camera when your camera can automatically keep that exposure compensation exactly where you want it to be. There's no sense of sitting there and playing this game with your shutter speed every 10 seconds, every 5 seconds when you move your camera slightly. You just need to let your camera do that for you. So anyways, guys, I hope you guys have a great week, and let me know if you agree or disagree with what I'm saying here. And subscribe to my channel if you find this interesting. I've got a video recently about the Yongnuo flashes, the new 600s that I got to test out. Just one little change on that video. I did say that they stopped production. That was technically true, but it was a temporary stop. There's no official announcement of what was being changed or why they stopped it. I can only assume it's because they've been having quality issues. But latest word on the street is that they're producing the flashes again. So anyways, you guys have a good day. Bye.